What's up guys, and welcome back to another eBay miniature rescue. Some of my friends and I are going to be taking a look at some of the first miniatures we ever painted and see what we can do about that now. So when I say friends, I reached out to probably 12 different Minitubers, and a lot of people seem pretty excited about this project. So I'm going to put a whole bunch of links in the description as well as a few at the end of the video, and that way you could check out some of their work from where they started to where they are now. The idea behind this video is to show progress. And what I mean by that is that as people who paint on YouTube, myself and, the people that you watch, we didn't exactly start here. It's not like this was our first foray into miniature painting. And I wanted to kind of hammer home the point that we all start somewhere. And it just takes time. Everyone's journey is a little bit different, and everyone always gets caught up in comparing themselves to a better painter, or, thinking I can't do that because I don't have this. And there's so many things about this hobby that you can do, that you can learn. I'm a perfectly good example. When I started painting, I had one paintbrush, and it happened to be a Citadel paintbrush, and at the time I think it was like $9. So yeah, it was pretty much the only brush I could afford, and it was supposed to be the miniature painting brush, and that's what you're supposed to use. And I know a lot more than I did, but even thinking about brushes, I started using Winsor & Newton brushes 5 days ago. The point is that no matter where you are in your hobby journey, there's probably something that you can still learn. There are things that you can improve on. And with the exception of maybe a few people, and even then they would probably tell you otherwise, everyone has something to learn. So this was my first army, and a lot of this I acquired through eBay. Some of the stuff I bought from a local store, along with a paintbrush and a handful of paints. And I didn't know anything, and there weren't any really good resources other than very expensive White Dwarf magazines in order to learn how to get better. Now, there were some websites that you could go to that were pretty much text-based. You could post an image and get a little bit of feedback, but generally it wasn't great. It was a very hostile environment, and for being, an 11, 12-year-old, it's not a great place to be. And so I eventually quit in 1999. So realistically, I had about a year's worth of painting experience, and on a very select number of models with a select number of paints. I started about a year and a half ago painting again when I started this channel. I'd kind of dipped my toe in, so to speak, but it wasn't until starting this channel and trying to record my paint schemes and so I can remember them that I really started to get into this hobby a lot more. So what we're going to do is take a couple of those miniatures that I had when I was younger, and I'm going to try and do, a pretty good tabletop job that I would consider very playable right now. So it started with some dark green. We're going to do this bale tan green first, and we're going to layer that over the entire model. Then I'm going to put some Abaddon black into the pot and start to enhance those shadows a little bit. Then coming in with some Sick green, which is a nice lighter green color. It's going to bring a lot of that brightness and those highlights out, And I'm going to shoot this kind of like a zenithal, so from the top down. And we're really going to pick up a lot of those details. Coming in with some goblin green, we're going to accentuate those highlights a little bit more in specific areas. For the most part, we want to do still a top-down type of a highlight. We really want to focus on the face and the shoulders and chest so that that's the most highlighted area on the model. I'm also coming in really lightly on the knees and kind of down the legs to just highlight the top of the armor plates. Laying down some black, gray, green, and a little bit lighter green onto the wet palette, we're going to start to glaze and really accentuate a lot of these details. So the first thing I'm going to do using a Baden Black is fill in the gun. Probably one of the biggest differences between my original models and what I'm hoping to achieve now is actually having detail remain. So I'm trying to keep the paint thin and using multiple coats to achieve a nice opaque color, instead of just slapping on straight out of the bottle. Mixing some Abaddon Black into Sick Green, we're going to get a nice wash consistency. You want to water that down a little bit. And I'm going to start to push the shadows a little bit more and start to put this in kind of like a pin wash in between all of the armor panels. And that's really going to define our shapes. Now, another one of the main goals that I have in continuing to improve my painting is to push contrast a lot further. So we're going to do the darks in the shadows and separate those pieces, and then I'm going to come back with this lighter moot green and start to push the highlights even more. Now, this moot green isn't a ton lighter or brighter than that goblin green that we laid down with the airbrush, but because there's some yellow in it, it's really going to saturate those highlights a lot more, and they're going to look a lot brighter and stand out. Something I really want to hammer home when it comes to, your painting journey is that you really shouldn't worry about paint colors. For one, you can pretty much mix any color that you want with a very small amount of paints. And when somebody says, hey, I'm using this specific color, it's not necessarily like that's the end all. So in this case, I'm using Bale Tan Green, but if you have a darker green or even a lighter green, you mix in some black and a bunch of water, you can get that wash look and you can start to place that where you want it. In this case, it's a pre-mix bottle, which is convenient, and it's basically just a watered down dark green. So I'm pushing the shadows a little bit more and it's running into the recesses and giving me a little bit more definition. The point being, don't let products stand in the way of your progress. Use what you have, and if you don't know how to get a certain result, ask someone online. There are plenty of resources, and I guarantee you will get an answer or an alternative. Pulling some of this gray sear off the wet palette, I'm going to fill in all the details that I want to be white. Now, a lot of what I'm doing is trying to copy my original model. I'm making modifications because, there are things that I know now that I didn't know then. But I'm trying to push this kind of green Bale Tan look, which isn't traditionally this green all over, by incorporating a lot more white into it. And since we don't have any white on the model, this gray is essentially going to look white. Now, we're going to come back later and brighten that up, but this is where we are right now. Now I'm going to take some of this gray sear and add it to that moot green, which is going to desaturate it and kind of de-yellow it a little bit. And I'm going to put this on the very topmost highlights of any of the armor panels, and then I'm going to edge highlight any of the sharpest corners. I really like doing the edge highlighting specifically because it really accentuates the pieces that are on this model, all the volumes, and it kind of gives them a little bit more separation, so more contrast. The last thing I'm going to do for this model is go over all the gray sear and highlight that with a more pure white. Like I said before, Bale Tan isn't traditionally green all over with white, it's kind of the opposite of that. So bringing in this pure white is really going to push the theme. Now, on my original models, there are a couple of them with bases. I honestly didn't even know that was a thing back then. So I went pretty simple with some cork bases, just gives a nice little platform. And I'm going to fill this in with some brown paint, and then I'm going to use this Vallejo weathering pigments. I'm using kind of the light white, a yellowish brown, and a dark brown, and just making some simple patterns, the darker colors in the shadowy areas. And that's really just going to give us a nice kind of earthy look that they're standing on. Really, I'm just trying not to overthink it too much. And, I like the way that they turned out. So next up, we're going to try and recreate the traditional white bale tan look. The first thing I'm going to do is use rust gray through the airbrush and put shadows on the entire model. On my original models back in good old 1999, I painted all of these recesses in and shadows with just straight black paint. Barely watered down. There weren't pre-made washes, and I honestly didn't even know what a wash was. Not to mention that generally for these white bale tan, it's not black. It's more of this bluish gray. So I'm going to try and shoot for that, and it'll be a little different than the original model, but honestly, I think the result is much better. Now that those airbrushing steps are over, I'm going to take the same rust gray, I'm going to water it down into more of a glaze consistency, just really watery paint. And I'm going to start to place that into the recesses and start to separate those white armor panels. Coming back in with a batten black, I'm going to take care of all the base coating for the gun. I'm going to edge highlight all of the armor panels and give more separation to each of these pieces using this Vallejo white. So going back to 1999 once again, I want to talk about sub-assemblies. Back then, I used really thick glue, and I built all the models and pretty much just cut them off the sprues and put them together, and that was that. It's never been my favorite part of the hobby, and more often than not, there's a mold line somewhere on one of my models. But if I had known back then that I could just leave the heads off and paint them separate, I probably would have gotten a better result with the two contrasting colors. So that's what I did here. I left all the heads off of these white bale tan and painted them green, pretty much exactly the same way that I'm painting the stripe on this gun right now, and in the same way that we painted the last Guardian. No reference intended. Now for the gun, I'm laying down the dark green and then coming in with that lighter green and doing mostly an all over layer, but I'm really trying to concentrate toward the end of the gun. Then I'm coming back with this moot green, kind of doing the same thing, pushing that paint towards the end of that gun, and then I'm going to edge highlight the whole thing, and you're really going to see that shift in color. The last thing that I really want to talk about before wrapping this up and getting to, the reveal, is that this video isn't in any way intended to be hey, look at me and how far I've come. It is specifically to say that everyone's hobby journey is different. And by comparing yourself to other people, you're going to want to quit. Which I did 20 years ago. But the thing of it is, I came back to a hobby that I really love. And I decided that I was going to paint how I wanted to paint. And learn as much as I possibly could, and not compare myself to anyone else's progress. My hope for this video is that you got something important out of it, in that we all start from the same place, and all of our journeys are completely different, and that there's no need to compare ourselves to the progress that other people are making. The most important thing is that we take time to enjoy our own personal hobby, do the things that make you happy, and have fun painting. I also just wanted to give a huge thank you to all the other channels that are involved in this massive collaboration. Honestly, I'm overwhelmed with how many people actually wanted to do this video with me, and I encourage all of you to go check out their stuff. All the channels that are linked are incredibly amazing. The people involved have unique voices and really cool perspectives on the hobby. Thank you once again for joining me on another eBay miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, as it really helps out the channel. If you'd like to see still photos of all the work that I do on this channel, head on over to Instagram at eBay Miniature Rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video.